Hello, dear ones. It's so good to be with you today. So often in our ministers' messages, we address issues of spiritual practice. Today, I wanted to lift up an aspect of congregational spiritual practice. In our faith tradition, it is called freedom of the pew and freedom of the pulpit. First, I want to give you a little history on freedom of the pulpit. I want to go back all the way to Transylvania in 1568, when the only Unitarian king in history ruled. And during his very short reign, he gathered the dominant religions in Transylvania and created with them, in consultation with them, an Edict of Torda. It's often called the Edict of Tolerance. And in this edict, it spells out that all of the four primary religions of the day in Transylvania, Catholicism, Lutheranism, Calvinism, and Unitarianism, had freedom. And it says explicitly, you are to view the gospel and speak your own religious truth accordingly. That sense of freedom of the pulpit is woven into the history of our Unitarian faith in Transylvania, and then that freedom of pulpit then followed through the history of Unitarianism to other Unitarian churches throughout Europe. Again, when Unitarianism was founded in the United States and first articulated in 1819 by William Ellery Channing, this was first done at the ordination of Jared Sparks, where William Ellery Channing preached a sermon on Unitarian Christianity. And in this sermon, he spells out the tenets of this new faith. In this sermon, he turns to Jared Sparks and tells Jared that you have the responsibility to speak your religious truth as you see it. He believed strongly in this tenet, and it became a bedrock understanding of our tradition and our polity. Interestingly to note, William Ellery Channing lost his pulpit when he came out against slavery years later. Now I want to move to 1848, when Theodore Parker, well-known orator and preacher, was preaching another ordination sermon, The Permanent and the Transient in Christianity. Again, in this sermon, he spells out some of our understanding of what is transient and what is permanent in our faith. Again, instead of turning to the ordinand, Charles Shackford, he turns to the people in the pew and says, you can choose. Every time you choose a preacher, you can choose to have somebody who, in today's parlance, coddles you, comforts you, and doesn't challenge you. And that will enthrall and constrict you, he says. Or you can have somebody who works diligently to try and speak truth to you. Some of the time, that truth will challenge you. And when you make those kinds of choices, you will continue to deepen religiously and grow in your understanding and depth. Now, how this manifests in today's congregations, we understand as ministers that we have the freedom of the pulpit, that we can preach in our own, out of our own truth, in service to love and that larger love, and in respect for your opinions, that we have the right and responsibility to preach from our truth. And what does it mean to have freedom of the pew? Well, it means that no one in the pews has to subscribe to a particular belief or practice, that we have an open, inclusive understanding of what is the religious, and that we have atheists and agnostics, theists, panentheists, Christians, Buddhists. Everyone is welcome in this large tent. And you do not ever have to agree with what the preacher is saying. As in fact, Freedom of the Pew encourages you to engage with us. Engage with us in dialogue. Let us know when you want to have a conversation. And it has implications for this time of transition, as Rob and I make our plans to retire in June. And the congregation, the leadership, and the staff, and the ministerial staff contemplate bringing on an interim minister. Now, the job of the interim minister is to shake things up a bit. Now, Rob and I have particular interests in how we create worship. There's certain recognizable aspects to the liturgy that we introduce to Unity. And it's going to be part of your spiritual practice as a congregation to sort out what is the transient and what is the permanent in the expression of your religious and communal life. What stays, what goes, what changes. And those, my dears, are issues that you all are going to be living into in the last months of our ministry, in the coming months of the interim, and in the early years of the new settled minister. Another aspect of the freedom of the pew is that time-honored privilege to call a minister. It is something every minister remembers with great clarity, and it is our hope that you as a congregation will remember that sacred act when you vote democratically to call your next settled minister or ministers. I look forward to those days for you. Be well.